On Ticker, this is Import Export with Lawrence Christophels.
Welcome back, everyone. In continuing today's theme around support and trying to really navigate the situation for importers, exporters and service providers around global supply chains and logistics providers. We're now joined by Steve Kelly and Ricky Zappia, who's going to join us from the Sydney office from Starboard IT. So Steve, mate, thanks for joining us again.
Good morning, Lawrence.
I'll cross to Ricky in a minute, but today was so important to bring you both into the conversation because everyone is being forced to work remotely. So Starboard IT, proud partners of HLC, we're really proud to have you part of that, and it really highlights why this is so important because the risks now of working remotely are really exacerbated. So data security, cyber security. So I wanted to, that's why I've asked both of you to join us to really explain to the audience and to the guests, the viewers I should say, what tips and advice can you give them and what are the real risks out there for remote working? So.
Yeah, sure. So like we saw with the bushfires, there's an element of the society that actually starts to take advantage of these situations, and COVID-19 is no different. What we're seeing now is a spate of different phishing emails and text messages going around, which I think people need to be aware of. I think awareness is probably the first step, and then having some tips and tricks on how to manage those situations as this gets further and further into the weeks and months. Yeah,
for sure. Ricky joins us in the Sydney studios. Sydney office, I should say, not studio. Hi, Ricky. How are you? Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Lawrence. I'm well. So the Sydney office is actually me at home because our company's transitioned to remote working already. So I'm actually at home today, working from my remote office.
Great. So I wanted to bring you in, Ricky, and have both of you because it's so important with this situation. What are the type of things? I know Steve just mentioned that there's already an increased sort of phishing and malware type of things. What if I'm working from home remotely? What should I be looking out for? What are the tips that you'd give companies or individuals or both?
Yep. So I think there's many things that are happening at the moment, Lauren, and one of the things is that around the crisis that happened at the moment, people are taking advantage of that, or the hackers are. So we're seeing things like text messages coming through to people, and it looks like they're from the government. So people want to actually look into these messages and click the links inside those messages to get more information about what's going on. And these links here actually phone and try to, download some malware on there. So when they log into their internet banking, it's actually malware, and they're trying to get your bank account details and steal your money. So these are the sort of things that we're seeing trending at the moment. So hackers are pretty smart. They're giving scenarios that are going on to try to trick people who are vulnerable, right? Because people want to click these links and get more information.
Okay. So Steve, can I ask you, what happens if I've seen an email and I suspect it to be dodgy? What should I do? Obviously not open the email, but how do I report it to my people for the office?
There's a few things there. So how do you identify a phishing email or text? So you've got to really look at the header. So who's it from? So sometimes they try and impersonate companies or individuals. So they might find out who the CEO is of a company and try and impersonate that person. Or you will see a malformed domain name in the address field. So it might be something like Commonwealth Bank with an extra couple of letters or numbers after it, .com.au. So they're trying to impersonate those things. That's one way to identify. The other way is to look into the body of the content. Look for things like a URL that looks suspicious. So look at the URL, see if it's suspicious. I would err on the side of caution, and I would try and alert management or your IT department to try and investigate this further before you respond or open any of the links.
Sure. Yeah. From an operational perspective, if I'm an organisation who I've got staff working remotely, well, most of them are being forced to these days. What should I be doing? Should I be creating like a checklist or educational program or something? What can we do to actually help our employees know what to look for? Is it?
It's really through an awareness program. This is what we do within our own company, and other companies as well. So we provide pretty much regular updates for our staff. You can invest a lot of money in security on your network and around your technology, but the percentages are really high about where the real vulnerabilities are, and it's with people. If they're armed with the knowledge of what to do in certain situations like phishing, which we just spoke about, and other aspects of security, things like walking away from your computer and not locking it, okay? They're simple things, and now when you're working from home, it heightens it even further. So you don't want your 2-year-old or your 4-year-old jumping on and pressing the wrong button and deleting files or whatever. So security comes down to all sorts of facets. It's not just one thing to do. You need a proper security awareness program in place that covers pretty much a broad range of security aspects and topics.
The other thing I wanted to ask both of you is that many of us these days are used to having a company laptop, but so many companies, especially SMEs, they haven't got those sort of infrastructure or equipment, so they've asked their employees to log on with their own computer at home. Now that's a huge other level of risk, right? Because if you haven't got your up-to-date virus software or all those sort of things, you know, that's a whole other risk.
Yeah, look, there are technologies that can ring fence that. Managing someone's personal computer is an area you don't want to get into. You want to actually preserve privacy wherever possible when people are working from home. And it's not just their personal PC, it's other aspects as well. When you're taking video conferences, for instance, you want to actually understand that we don't want to pry into their private life, and you're in their lounge room or their office or wherever they're doing their work. So you've got to take into account a whole bunch of things when you send people home from work.
Yeah. So a lot of things I've heard over the last few days and last week was, you know, people not really understanding the VPN, a virtual private network, and how important that is for making sure that you're communicating on the right platforms. Is it possible just to explain to the viewers what are the best type of strategies around that?
Yeah, so if we step back a little bit, we talk about data at rest, data in transit, and data in use. So what we're talking about here is data in transit. So what we're trying to do is, because we're working from home and we're probably transmitting data across the public internet, it can be intercepted and replayed. So the technologies here that we use are encryption, and VPN is a common method of encrypting data in transit, and probably the most common that everyone uses. So look, most cloud providers have this in place as out of the box. So Microsoft Office 365, for instance, has this. AWS, other providers as well, but you need it set up. You need it set up properly. So you need to really look to your provider for advice on that, and what your actual solutions and requirements require.
Ricky, I was going to ask you if you're still there online with us.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Wanted to ask you, what are the type of platforms available? And I know Steve just mentioned Office 365, and you know, we've recently transitioned that to Office 365 ourselves with ATLC, and it's got so many capabilities that, you know, I'm sort of a bit overwhelmed, to be honest, where to start. But you know, what are the type of platforms available out there for companies who are like me, who are new to this?
Aren't likely to use Office 365, is that? Because I think, you know, one of the things why we chose to use Office 365 internally.
Make sure if that's locked.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah, look, there's many. Office 365 is one of them, and as you said, there's a lot of tools in Office 365 that you can use, and it's a cloud-based platform as well. Google offer G Suite, which is probably the next biggest provider in the office space. Now that will probably provide you with, you know, depending on the worker itself, will probably provide that worker with 60 to 80% of what they require to do. They'll give them their email, their files, collaboration tools, and all that sort of stuff that they need, video conferencing, instant messaging, and all that sort of stuff that brings teams together. where things start to get a little bit more difficult is when you start to think of the other mission critical applications that are required of that person's job.
Yeah.
Now, if the company is actually transitioned to the cloud, then that becomes less of an issue, because you can access the cloud pretty much if you've got an internet connection. If you've got on-premise applications, then you'll need what we talked about previously. You'll need secure VPNs or some sort of connectivity that's secure to get access from home to those applications.
So that's, I suppose, working efficiently, effectively creates a bit of an opportunity then for the employees and the employers to navigate, what you need to do to log on. But one of the interesting challenges is that how do you maintain bandwidth when you've got multiple people on the same document or call? So I know you've told me some great tips and advice about switching off video. What are the sort of ideas and tips around that?
Yeah, sure. So when you're working from home, as you alluded to, you're dependent as a business on the bandwidth that individuals subscribe to.
Right.
So in other words, if certain families decide that low bandwidth is the option from them, that restricts businesses in what we can actually put down that channel. So turning off video when you're doing video conferences and just having the audio channel open would be one. If that's still not effective and you're still getting poor performance, then revert to your mobile phones or landlines to get that audio through. You really need to judge it at the time. And what I've noticed since this the virus outbreak is that bandwidth is reducing. Contention in the suburbs is high. A lot of people are working from home, so you're not getting the same throughput that you probably think you would expect and you subscribe to. I've noticed that mine's reduced from 15 meg down to 4 or 5 meg. Wow. So
I've noticed on my mobile phone, even that the signal strength has dropped.
That's another way that you can actually get around the bandwidth within homes. Sometimes 4G offers better bandwidth, so tethering off your phone if you're having trouble with your land internet connection is another way to get around that issue.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Great. I think we've got Ricky back now. Ricky, you can hear me okay now?
Yeah, I think so. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah. Great. Ricky, I wanted to ask. So, we're talking about Australian businesses, but now everyone around the world is pretty much in the same boat. We're all being isolated, self-isolating, working remotely. What's the best time to understand what the other threats are from security, but also how can we work with outside networks? So I suppose my question there is, if we're dealing with outside stakeholder companies, is there extra layers of protection? So if I'm dealing with a supplier overseas or a customer, if I'm an exporter overseas, and they want to we're doing some, not just a conference call, but we're actually sharing a file or sharing documents on a platform, like let's say I'm doing a product design for R&D, or I'm trying to place an order on their production, and I have to send that through across my network to theirs. Are there additional layers that we need to consider, or any other tips and advice you'd recommend for companies working internationally across different platforms?
Sure. So yeah, I guess there's multiple platforms that you can use for file transfer and file storage. And we'd always recommend using an encrypted platform. So it's something that has some encryption built into it naturally. So, there's a number of file sharing tools you can use. And then, like, for instance, even Firefox, their browser, has actually got some built-in encryption file sending capability. So, you might already have an application or have the software that would allow you to actually send encrypted files or encrypted data. Yep. The important thing, I think, when working with external or remote secure system, using best practices, and they're actually secure, because the last thing you want to do is send an encrypted file to their system, and then a hacker gets access to their system because their network's compromised and they don't have a good level of security. Yeah. So one thing that we always look for when working with providers and vendors is to make sure that they've got some security certifications. Yeah. So ISO 27001 is probably the data security certification that we look for the most, and our customers and our partners look to, I guess, the people they work with to make sure that they've got these high level of security standards and governance. And you know that if someone has ISO 27001 certification, you can securely send data back and forth, and they're going to have best practices incorporated into their system. So I would definitely look in terms of what to look for when working with a partner or provider, is look at their credentials and look at what they've done internally to make sure that your data is going to be.
Yeah, really important points, Ricky. What we're about to run out of time, but one of the this is so important to especially importers and exporters around Australia. We've put together between Starboard and ATLC a really valuable webinar for next week. So we are going to put this up on the screen, but we've got a webinar next Thursday on the 26th of March. It's a lunchtime webinar, short and sweet, 12:30 to 1 o'clock. But we're going to have Steve and Ricky specifically talking around the cybersecurity and productivity tips when you're working remotely. So it's a free seminar, a free webinar, I should call it. People have got to practice saying webinar versus seminar. But it's a remote working essentials event. You can register for free at Eventbrite, so it's remoteworkingwebinar.eventbrite.com.au. Get along there, free of charge, and you'll be able to really hear some more in-depth tips and advice around how to work remotely safely, securely, and efficiently. That's a really important part that we haven't had a chance to touch on today. But there's so many things that we can all learn from. So thank you for helping me put that webinar on for next week, and looking forward to having many of our audience join that and really delving into a lot deeper detail around how to protect and be secure and effective working remotely.
Looking forward to it.
Great.
Okay.
Thanks, Ricky in Sydney. Look forward to seeing you on the webinar next week. Thanks, Steve, mate, for coming into Melbourne.
Yeah,
and
thanks, Lawrence.
Look forward to catching up with you on the webinar as well next week. So that's about it for us today on the show. Hopefully you've got some great valuable tips and advice from IP branding, strategy, data security, protection, and effectiveness in remote working. But get along to that webinar next week, Thursday 26th, 12:30, lunchtime, half hour. And look forward to seeing you there. And we'll have the show there in the morning as well. So thanks again.
Okay.
Right, see you next week.